Hey, welcome. I'm Ariel Patricia from Sacred You, Sacred Stories. I'm here with Tigrilla Gardenia, World Ambassador for Plant Intelligence, and Gina Mazza, uh, another World Ambassador for Plant Intelligence, because she is a big fan and follower of Tigrilla's work, and we're going to talk about that today as well. And I'm also a big fan and follower. So I'd like to introduce everyone to Tigrilla Gardenia, who's actually the creator of our new course on Sacred You, Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom. And today we're going to talk all about plant intelligence, reconnecting with the plant kingdom, what it is, why it's important, and how you can do it too. So Tigrilla, welcome. Gina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so full disclosure, Gina introduced Tigrilla to Sacred You, and Tigrilla, Gina, and I all have something very important in common. And it's a common experience with this beautiful place in the world called Damanhur, Italy. And I've only had the opportunity to be there for 2 weeks so far. Gina has spent months there, and Tigrilla has lived there for 10 years. So Tigrilla, just for people who don't know, maybe just let's start there, because a lot of the essence of the work that you're doing, this beautiful work that you are bringing to the world, starts in Damanhur, right? So what is Damanhur?
Yeah, so putting Damanhur into words is never an easy task. I always say that in order to really understand what Damanhur is, you should probably ask a number of different Damanhurians, and probably even people who are not Damanhurians, and find out. So Damanhur is one of the largest spiritual eco communities in the world, really. Actually, we're pretty much the largest in Europe itself. And it's a community that was founded in the late 1970s, actually mid-1970s, now that I think about it, that was about bringing together what happens when you bring your spirituality into everyday life. And I often say that I live in Hogwarts for adults. That's kind of the way I think of it, because here the idea of esoteric magic and spirituality and politics and cooking and nature and basically life, everything that is family, social dynamics is all kind of comes together in one place. And we've, in this sort of view, this idea of this massive mission that we have, which is the reawakening of the divine spark in every human being. So for us, we come together here in this location, we come together across in different parts of the world, with that whole mission of how is it that we can help humanity really reawaken from their, to a certain extent, slumber, but more than anything, to the memories that we've forgotten as we incarnate into this life.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely beautiful. And Gina, how would you describe Damanhur, having spent months there and being intimately connected as well, as a non-Damanhur
on the spot?
I always say Hogwarts, Whoville, and a Fellini movie all combined, but no, and in all seriousness, I think it is absolutely a phenomenal example of the potential for humanity to live in concert together. I mean, it's to me the biggest eco community that I know of in the world, where they're successfully, not just talking about esoterics and spirituality and all of these different things, but actively living it together every day. And to me, that's where the rubber really meets the road, where you're playing it out every day. And I just find it to be completely fascinating. And I feel so at home there, because my actual family of origin is from Italy. So to me, it felt like coming home. And I know a lot of people have that feeling when they go to Damanhur.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent 2 weeks in Damanhur, and I mean, to agree to your point, I mean, it is expansive and it touches on every aspect. I mean, the temples of humankind, we could do a series on that and not even scratch the surface. But one of the things that I just found so beautiful and fascinating and incredible there in Damanhur is also the idea of the sacred forest, and people living within the forest, the greeting trees, when you come up to different homes or places, there's a tree you greet, because you're recognizing the trees in the plant kingdom as sentient beings. The mother tree project that Damanhur is doing around the world, reconnecting, so the communication between the mother trees around the planet. And what I found, just to stay in the nature theme, because that's what we're on today, right? What I found just so especially beautiful is that all around in the Damanhur community are gardens that are humans aren't allowed in, that the gardens are there for the fairy folk, for the devas, for the elemental beings, and understanding and respecting, you know, that there are sentient beings in many forms that are not human forms, in many that maybe are not readily able to be seen by most people. And so that to me is just such a beautiful expression of embracing all of life and honoring all of life. And I think that's why Damanhur is so incredibly special to me, and why it's so incredibly just jazz that you're doing a course with us at Sacred You, and that you're bringing really a focus on the plant kingdom, you know, to the forefront.
Yeah, it's always beautiful for me to listen to the experiences that people have. Sometimes it's just like anything, right? We're not perfect. We live here, and this is another way that Damanhur is thought of as a laboratory, right? A laboratory for humanity. And as a laboratory, it means we have a lot of failed experiments too, and we have a lot of experiments that really go forward and evolve and move forward. And so it's really interesting to hear as people come and how they experience it. And this is one of the reasons that I have to say I did fall in love with Damanhur, was the openness, the fact that our flaws aren't necessarily all hidden behind some kind of masks, or we don't pretend to be kind of this perfect place. On the contrary, it's life, and life has all kinds of different aspects of it. And this relationship that we have with different aspects of life, whether you're talking about, you know, nature, as you said, nature spirits, or plant world, or animals, but also moving beyond that, right? All the other beings that exist in this overall spiritual ecosystem, and this whole manifested ecosystem that we live in. And that goes from the entire planet, but also beyond. So there's lots of alliances, there's lots of opportunities to connect, and there's also lots of opportunities to experiment new ways of life and new ways of interaction and reconnection.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you're doing a lot of bringing that awareness, right, to the world with this course, Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, because you're bringing the wisdom and the experience of plant intelligence basically into people's homes. And so there's this beautiful course, and I posted a link at the top, that's Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom. It's a 7-module course, and you can go to the page and we'll talk about you know, to explore all of it. But I'd like to talk today about module 1, or some of the aspects of module 1, and that really is about our perception of the plant kingdom, and 2 particular things. And I want to open it up to you and Gina as well. And Gina, I have a story I want you to tell, but the idea around plant blindness, and do plants have senses? And if they do, what senses do they have? So lots to talk about, and any questions, you know, just type them in the chat and or the comments, and or even later, if you're watching this on replay, and you know, we'll tune Tigrilla into them. If you have questions, you can answer them as well. So Tigrilla, what the heck is plant blindness, and why should we feel it?
Plant blindness. Plant blindness, to be honest, is something we all suffer from at some level. I mean, even myself, after all these years, I am still sometimes, you know, things that happen and I'm like, oh my God, there it was, I did it again, because we just do. So plant blindness is really the inability that we as humans have to see plants for the functions and the services that they provide to humanity, and for their overall role in everyday life. When we sit back, we think about it, we usually get there, right? If I was to ask just about anybody to really think about a plant, whether you think they're sentient or not sentient, when you stop, you're able to recognize the idea that plants are important, right? Trees are important, whether you're thinking about it from a material perspective, or whether you're thinking about it from more the emotional or spiritual perspective. But plant blindness affects us in our sort of everyday waking life. And that's the place where we tend to forget the roles and functions, not knowing enough about plants. In indigenous cultures, for example, a plant, a specific species of plant, doesn't just have one name like we think of. Here in our terms, in our more Western culture, plants usually have at least kind of two, right? They have the scientific name that almost nobody knows. And then they maybe have a colloquial name, something that you use. In indigenous cultures, for example, they'll have a different name. Like you'll have a name in the spring, a name in the summer, a name when you're flowering, a name when instead you're more dormant. All of these different aspects, because there's a relationship that's way deeper, and there's an understanding that a plant doesn't change, that a plant changes throughout a cycle, that there is more of a relationship. Not having that type of culture for the majority of us means that really we forget what is the importance of plants when it's inconvenient for us. It's very rare, and we see this over and over again. Just recently in Australia, for example, they cut down a major important plant for the population there because, you know, they wanted to build a road. And it was just done. And even the protests and such, because certain people don't see the value that goes beyond the monetary value. And I don't say monetary because people are greedy. I say monetary because we in life tend to put everything down to dollars and cents. So not understanding the overall impact is part of that plant blindness. And honestly, like I said, we all do it. So it's not a thing about feeling a guilt. It's about awareness. It's about waking up to it. It's about understanding it. I myself sometimes step on a plant without any kind of awareness, or I'm, you know, doing something and I see a piece of grass that I, for whatever reason in that moment, and I might pull it out. And then I sit there and say, wait a minute, did I think about that for a second? Did I do it because I really felt like it was the right thing to do? Did I connect with that piece of grass and have a conversation like, is this it? Or did I put my human needs above the needs of the plants without any kind of conditioning, like without any kind of contemplation, excuse me? That's the heart of plant blindness. So it goes from very big to, I go and I look at a picture of a forest and, you know, what I see is the bear cub in the corner. And I say, oh, look, a picture of a bear cub. And I forget that the rest of the picture is covered in plants. I don't say, oh, look, a forest with a bear cub. Or, oh, look, there's an aspen tree and a bear cub. I tend to just say a bear cub. And that is another form of plant blindness. Or when I look at somebody's home, if there's a cat or a dog, I'll stop and say, hi, like, oh, what an adorable kitty or whatever. But for me, for example, now, as I'm looking at both of you beautiful ladies, I'm seeing the fact that both of you have a plant in the picture. And to me, that's like the connection. And we often forget that. We leave the house and we greet the humans, we greet the animals. If we see a mouse, we freak out on the city streets, but we don't stop to look at the grass that's growing or the super tenacious little moss that's growing through the cracks of the sidewalk. Like that's all a form of plant blindness, because what happens is we will just rip all that out when it's inconvenient for us or without even thinking. We sit on the grass. I was giving a lecture once to a group of people around this topic, and there was a person sitting right in front of me. We were outdoors. They were all sitting on the grass, and there was a person outside of me that was mindlessly just ripping up grass as we were talking. And I got about halfway through, and I stopped, and I looked at the person for a while. And she looked at me, and she was like, yeah. I'm like, what you doing? And she's just like, looks at her hands, and her hands were filled with little bits and pieces of grass. And she was like, oh my, never even clicked in my head. And we were talking about it. So that's how deep the plant blindness is for so many people.
I think what's really, for me, what was really eye-opening for that, because it is, we almost think of the plants as like a backdrop. You know, it's a landscape that to our lives, right? So it's just kind of there, and we may go, oh, it's beautiful, and keep walking. But to your point of what you're teaching is that plants have things to teach us. Their plants are sentient, plants are conscious. In the course, you talk about plant wisdom from 470 million years. So plants are not only here to support us and help heal us and nourish us, you know, they have other roles. And if we're not recognizing them as anything other than just this landscape that we may occasionally decide, you know, maybe we go, wow, that's really pretty. We're missing a really important opportunity, right? For communication, for a relationship, and not only to take care of them, but for them to help take care of us, that interdependent relationship, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the biggest dangers is from a perspective where we're losing, we talk about it in human terms, where we're losing elderly wisdom, we're losing all these things. But plants, like you said, have seen the birth of humanity. If we want to find out about things about our past, who better than to ask the beings that were here? Who
Right.
better to have a conversation with than those that have experienced moments of peace, but also moments of war in order to figure out strategy? And who better to have a conversation with about what it really means to connect into this world? What does it really mean to create ecosystems and communities that are working together in harmony? What does it mean to deal with a disturbance or a crisis? Like, what are new ways that we know the old ways aren't working, right? Isn't it Albert Einstein that said you can't fix a problem using the same logic that got you into it? So why not work with those that have fixed a lot of problems?
Right.
Which are those plants, right? And they have these other mechanisms which we go through in the course that are physiological. So we talk a lot about science, and I love when you get into the science and you understand how the science supports the spirituality and vice versa, right? The spirituality gives you the opportunity to kind of look outside the box, to think with a new way, and then the science backs that up. And then using your kind of creativity outlets, using your art, you're able to express that. Because the other piece is that for many people, the reason they don't think they can communicate with plants and they can't really receive that wisdom, or they don't trust it, is because, of course, we're looking for it in the terms that we understand. We're looking for it in our thoughts and our words, and different aspects that we think, oh, that's how I'm supposed to be able to just journal this in like a linear fashion. And it's like, well, not exactly, because you're talking to beings that have a completely different language and a completely different thought process, right? I don't talk very much about plant emotions. Like, you won't hear me often say, oh, a plant is happy or sad, because those are human emotions. What are our plant emotions? That's the exciting part to me. Like, what are plants experiencing? We know their actions to a certain extent, but even that, getting into the plant mind requires us to kind of sometimes use a feeling. I had a woman in a class that I gave once. In this particular class, there's an end journey that's very long, and you literally become a part of the plant world in this journey. And when she came back, she sat down and she said, I had the tree that she was working with invited her in to see the world through the plant's eyes, through Key's eyes. And so she says, I cannot describe what I saw. I knew it was a vision. I knew it was a sense of sight, but I don't have any words or any description in human terms to describe this. And that's it. That's the part. That's the thing that we need to accept. And what I hope that things like this course will do is give you permission to not have to put it into human terms. Permission for you to experience it and feel it and integrate it into your being in whatever way that works. And for some people, it does kind of come out through, again, poetry and drawing and all kinds of artistic expressions, because it's the closest I think we as humans have to experiencing things that are otherworldly, as I might say.
Right. So Gina, one of the things that you had me at hello with this, but one of the things that really intrigued me, and I'd love you to speak about as a student, right, learning from Tigrilla, you said to me that your whole entire way of even perceiving our relationship with plants, like, is unlike anything that you would have perceived without learning from Tigrilla and what she shares. So can you explain like what that really means and what that was like for you? Because I was just like, oh my gosh. And now working with Tigrilla and having her course on Sacred You, I'm like, it's life-changing, a little bit of a shift in this perspective. You're on mute. Yeah.
It's truly life-changing, because up until that point of working with Tigrilla and Damanhur, I thought of myself as a nature girl, as a plant lover, but it was a one-way street. I was really just looking at nature and flowers and gardening and all of these things that I do, love to do, as something that benefits me and my family and my environment. And once I started learning from Tigrilla, learning from Damanhur, the music of the plants, all the offerings that they have, it totally shifted me, because for the first time ever, I was able to view the perspective of what I was doing from the plant's perspective, and it just completely opened my eyes to all that which I didn't know. Again, I think as human beings, we have a certain hubris about us, like everything's here for us, right? But learning about the plant kingdom really helped me to understand that, really, like, we need nature. Nature doesn't really need us. We need nature. And so we're in this co-creative, co-collaborative environment with nature, not trying to have dominion over it or dominance over it. That's to our disadvantage if we look at it that way. And so I started to really look at everything differently. Like, now I have a hard time even cutting flowers from my garden and bringing them in the house, because that's basically killing them, right? Or cutting my grass even. And just looking at, again, a lot of what I learned from Tigrilla is that it isn't like trying to personify, trying to put human emotion on plants, because they have their own intelligence. So it was like learning about that, almost like learning a different language, or learning about a different culture, which I love to do anyway. And it was all there right in front of me all the time. And so I absolutely have a different communication with nature now. And why does that matter? Like, we're talking about this today. The reason that it matters is because it changes your life. Like, it's not just this thing of going outside and, oh, I'm enjoying nature. Viewing it differently and understanding the intelligence from the plant's perspective, the trees and everything around you, it gives you a different dynamic, a different approach to your own life and how you're living it. I don't know how else to kind of summarize that, but it is that big of a game changer. So, what we're talking about here today is not just a nice aside, like, oh yeah, when I get done work, I'll go outside and I'll enjoy nature. No, this is about true co-creation 24/7. You might be in your house and not feel connected to it, but it's there all the time. So yeah, it's so fascinating. And I'm just so glad, just so glad to be in this conversation, because it's really important.
It's a very important conversation. And I just to add something that was really, again, everything I say is life-changing, Tigrilla, when I'm talking about what I'm learning from you, but it is. So let's just call it what it is. But another piece, and this is all in module 1. So this is a 7-module course. This is all module 1. Another piece that came about was it really is, and Gina, I love how you said it's like another culture, right? Like looking at another culture, because it's that is probably the best description I've heard, right? Is that analogy of that. And the piece I'll add to that, which was also really important that I learned from you, Tigrilla, is that communicating with the trees or individual plants, that plants are different than trees, right? It's not just all nature, but that plants are different than plants and trees are different than trees. So there's a park by my house and I walk there most days and I visit different trees all the time. What I learned from you is that to not assume what the tree is going to say to me or how I should interact with it, or what tree wisdom is, or whatever, or what's supposed to happen, but to ask each individual tree, because each individual tree is its own being, it's its own consciousness, and though they're part of the larger tree consciousness, they're different, and you can have different relationships with different trees. And I started to do that. I started to just ask them. I just started to show up in front of them and just be like, hey, I'm Ariel. And just getting quiet and just, in my way of communicating with them, seeing what they, maybe if they had anything they want to talk about or chat or show me or whatever. And it's astounding how different the energies are and how different the conversations are, even among, so bringing that level that you're bringing to the consciousness of, hey, it's, they're intelligent, but they're intelligent in and of their own specificity of each plant and each tree as well. You know what I mean? Right? I mean, if you can just comment on that, but that just blew my mind, that part of it.
Yeah, we again, as human beings, we tend to think of ourselves as individuals, right? We use this word as like, I'm an individual, and yeah, yes, but what is an individual? Because I'm also made, like we say, we have our brain intelligence, or our mind in that aspect. We also say we have a gut mind, right? That's what I'm talking about, my gut instinct, and sometimes my emotions act in a way that my body physically reacts differently than what I think. All kinds of different pieces. And so we are individuals. We just also forget that we're connected to many other aspects. And the same thing with the plants, right? Every single plant, even if it's the same, even if they're the same species, even if they're just, 4 feet away from one another, that was different experiences, different ground, different birds that landed, different sun exposure, different people that passed by. Maybe, one was always visited because there was people passing in the path, and this is in the park, and the other one is a little bit more behind. And that makes them two individuals with very, very different experiences. And we forget that. I mean, even our blades of grass, when you go and you look at grass is usually made up of lots of different kinds of plants, all having these co-experience together, but each one with its own way of living that experience. And so taking that time to get to know it also changes the way I view myself in relation to people around me. All of a sudden, the idea of what does alone really mean? Is it alone with my thoughts? But my thoughts, my emotions are different. My actions, my thoughts, and my emotions. I mean, isn't it Gandhi, I think, who said, happiness is when what you think and what you feel and what you do are in harmony. And so that's already 3 parts of me. Imagine a tree that's been sitting in a place for 25 years or 50 years or 700 years. Think about all the different and unique experiences that one tree has had. So going and talking to a giant sequoia in one place and going to talk to a giant sequoia in another place are not the same. And that's the other part, is that when we start to look at the plant world in this way, we realize that they're all incredible relationships to have. One of them might be really great at talking to you about economy, because they maybe are in a part of the forest where they are managing the resources and dealing with it. So they can give you ideas about resource management that might maybe be applied to something like an economy, where maybe another is instead densely with a lot of different plants all trying to get sunlight. And so it's much better at helping you understand how you deal with more kind of pressing needs, more needs that are connected to something else, or another, and friendships, and what does that really look like in other aspects. So each one can teach us something based on their personal experiences, and yet collectively still have the knowledge of the entire species and race, because they are all connected on a greater scale across many different types of physical as well as non-physical dimensions.
Yeah, it's just so incredibly fascinating, and that's why I'm thrilled we're having this conversation. I'm thrilled that your course, Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, is available on Sacred You. And to Gina's point, like it changes the way we show up in the world when we take this next, we peel back, that leaf a little bit more, right? It matters because it changes us. It adds depth to our experience, and that we can then bring to the world as well.
Right.
Gina, we're coming to a close, at least for today. So Gina, last thoughts, words you'd like to leave people with on the topic.
I was just thinking about that we all probably have a tree story right? That with a connection with a tree. And I was thinking about one that I had a couple years ago when I was uprooting myself from one location to another geographic location, and how a 150-year-old ancient black walnut tree taught me what I needed to know about keeping my roots in one place, but seeding myself somewhere else. And so that seems like a pretty straightforward metaphor that a tree would teach us. But at the time, I literally did feel like it was speaking to me and giving me guidance. And so what I want to say is that, in parting here, is that it doesn't take any kind of special woo kind of thing to do this. Like, we're part of nature, nature's part of us. And so it's just simply being inquisitive and asking, just like simply asking for the wisdom to come forth. And it might not happen for you like it did for me, like very quickly and in a sort of clairvoyant kind of way, but it could come in a different way, where you end up getting some other confirmation of what's being told to you. I think trees are particularly wise, and particularly, I think of them as friends, like part of my extended friend network. So that would be my parting advice, is to just ask and receive the wisdom.
And the beautiful part is that it happens differently for everybody. And this course, Tigrilla, that you've put together really allows people to take a deep dive into this subject and immerse themselves at their own pace. And you combine science, spirituality, and the arts with exercises and teachings and meditations and writing prompts, really taking people through a phenomenal journey. And we've just scratched the surface on the first module, which is free. Which is free to view at Sacred You. So Tigrilla, parting words, for the your hopes for the viewers. So anything about the course? What would you like people to know?
One thing I hope everybody will experience, whether you just download the first module and just try that out and get that basic information, which is so foundational and already so life-changing in that aspect, or whether you take the entire class, which of course I would hope that you do the entire course. But it's to recognize that plants are everywhere. They're everywhere, and all of them have something to share with you. I've received profound information from grass, for example, or moss, or ancient wisdom from ferns and horsetail, that is some of the oldest plants in the entire world, like some of the original species that started out when plants first came to the land. And, I've seen little tiny plants like liverworts this big, and just pass on so much. So that plant blindness might kind of start to shed from the big, because it's easy to see the big tree or maybe the hedge, but then little by little start to come down and recognize that you always have somebody around you to connect with. There is always some person, whether that be a human person, an animal person, or a plant person, that is around for you to connect with in whatever moment you might need, whether that's advice or support or to share a celebration. You're never alone. And so my hope is that this will give you a piece to open a new level of conversation, to learn a new culture, to learn a new language, to learn lots of new languages in some ways from the plant world, that will transform the relationship that you have with people around you, with what is considered the environment, which is really just a part of you, but specifically with yourself. It really helps you understand your true nature and how your relationship with the external nature around you is just a reflection of the relationship you have with the internal nature within you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So Gina, Mazza, thank you. Tigrilla Gardenia, thank you. I want to just encourage everyone to the link to the course is in the copy, or go to Sacred You and check it out. You know, check it out, watch experience module 1. It's actually meditations and journals and teachings and prompts. I mean, it's the full, a full module for you for free. Check it out, because it's really about deepening our awareness, expanding our understanding, of who we are. And as Tigrilla says in the course, the more we understand plants, the more we'll understand ourselves. And so that's a pretty cool thing. So everyone have a great day. Go hug a tree, go talk to a plant, and take really good care. Bye.